Buckle up for a deep dive into the high-stakes world of negotiation, the kind where every word can tip the scales. We're talking, FBI hostage situations, that level of intensity.
Intense is an understatement.
Right. And that's the world we're jumping into today with Never Split the Difference.
A fantastic read.
It is. This book, written by former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss, dives headfirst into the psychology of negotiation.
And what's fascinating is how those high-pressure scenarios translate to almost any negotiation, even everyday ones.
Exactly. What I found most surprising was Voss saying that the word no can be your secret weapon. Sounds counterintuitive, right?
Absolutely. It goes against everything we think we know about negotiation.
Right, like no is a dead end. But Voss argues it can be a gateway to understanding, even trust, and ultimately getting to a mutually beneficial outcome.
And that's the key, isn't it? Understanding what makes the other side tick.
So it's about more than just getting to yes.
Way more. It's about uncovering their needs, fears, even those hidden motivations. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm hooked already. And then there's this idea of tactical empathy, which I'm dying to hear more about. Voss talks about using these subtle techniques, like get this, mirroring someone's words back to them, and how it can completely shift the dynamic.
It's surprisingly powerful. Mirroring. It taps into that deep human need to be heard, validated.
So it's about really listening, reflecting back what they're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It disarms people. Those emotional defenses we build up, especially in a tough negotiation, they start to come down.
Which makes sense. If you feel heard, you're more likely to open up.
Exactly. It builds trust, creates a space for real dialogue.
Now, the outline mentions challenging conventional wisdom. What exactly does Voss take issue with when it comes to how we're usually taught to negotiate?
Well, think about the classic advice. We're told to focus on logic, find a middle ground, avoid conflict.
Right, be agreeable, try to win-win.
Exactly. And Voss argues that approach, while well-intentioned, can backfire, especially when the stakes are high.
Okay, I can see how that might not work so well in, say, a hostage situation. There's not a lot of room for splitting the difference there.
Precisely. You're dealing with intense emotions, irrational behavior sometimes. You can't reason your way through every situation.
So what's the alternative?
Understanding the psychology behind decision-making.
So it's about getting inside their heads.
Exactly. Voss leans heavily on Daniel Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Remind me about that.
Right, so System 1, that's our gut reactions, fast, instinctive, and System 2 is slower, more deliberate, our rational side.
So how does that play into negotiation?
Well, traditional negotiation tactics often target System 2, that logical side. But Voss argues that to really connect, you need to engage with System 1, the emotional core.
So even in a business deal, it's about tapping into the emotions behind the decisions.
Exactly. Because emotions, they're powerful drivers.
Makes sense. Now, Voss's own path to becoming an FBI negotiator was pretty unconventional, wasn't it?
To say the least. Can you imagine being told, with no formal negotiation training, that volunteering at a suicide hotline would be good experience?
Whoa. Talk about a crash course in communication.
Right. That's where it all started for him.
Wow. So instead of textbooks, he was thrown into these real-life, high-pressure situations.
Exactly. Navigating intense emotions, building trust when it mattered most. That experience shaped his whole approach.
That's incredible. And it actually brings us to a key point in the book, Tactical Empathy. What's the story there?
It's about truly understanding what the other person is feeling, where they're coming from.
And that's where those subtle techniques come in, right? Like you mentioned mirroring earlier.
Yeah, mirroring can be surprisingly powerful. Basically, you're just repeating back the last few words someone says, often with a questioning tone.
It seems almost too simple. How does that work in a high-stakes negotiation?
Well, think about a time when you felt truly heard in a conversation. Did the other person just agree with you, or did they really reflect back what you were saying, how you were feeling?
I see what you're saying. It's about feeling understood, not just having someone agree with you.
Exactly. That's what mirroring does. It validates the other person, shows them you're really listening, and that can be incredibly disarming, especially in a tense situation.
So it's like you're lowering their defenses without them even realizing it.
Precisely. You're creating a space for real dialogue, for genuine connection. And that's when you can really start to understand their needs, their fears, the things that might be holding them back.
Which brings us to labeling. That's another tactic we wanted to get to. What's that all about?
So labeling takes mirroring a step further. You're actually identifying and acknowledging the other person's emotions. Instead of just reflecting back their words, you're giving a voice to what they're feeling.
That's interesting, but it also sounds a little risky. What if you get their emotions wrong?
It does require a bit of emotional intelligence, for sure. But even if you miss the mark slightly, the act of trying to understand, of acknowledging their emotions, can be incredibly powerful.
Because it shows you're really trying to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. You're demonstrating empathy, which is crucial for building trust. And that trust is what allows you to move beyond those surface-level arguments and get to the heart of the matter.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. So we've covered mirroring and labeling. What other tools does Voss have up his sleeve?
Oh, he's got a whole toolkit. One of my favorites is something he calls calibrated questions.
Calibrated questions, what are those exactly?
Basically, they're open-ended questions designed to subtly guide the conversation, to get the other person thinking in a particular way. The key is to start with how or what.
Okay, so give me an example.
Sure, instead of demanding a discount, you might ask, how can we work together to make this price more manageable?
Ah, I see. It's about shifting the dynamic from a confrontational demand to a more collaborative problem-solving approach.
Exactly. Calibrated questions encourage the other person to consider solutions, ideally solutions that benefit both sides. Voss tells a great story about one of his students who used this technique to secure funding from a dean for a project.
I always love a good student outsmarts the administration story. Tell me more.
So, this student needed a significant amount of money for their project, and this particular dean was known for being, well, let's just say he wasn't exactly known for handing out money easily.
I can imagine. So how did they convince him?
Instead of making a long, drawn-out argument for why they deserved the funding, the student just kept asking these calibrated questions. Things like, how can we ensure this project has the resources it needs to be successful, and what are your biggest concerns about moving forward with this?
Brilliant. They essentially forced the dean to justify why he shouldn't fund the project.
Exactly. And it worked. By subtly shifting the power dynamic, by putting the dean in a position where he had to come up with solutions, the student was able to secure the funding they needed.
I love it. It's all about being strategic, about understanding how to influence the conversation without being overly aggressive or confrontational.
Absolutely. Okay, now there's one more tactic I want to mention before we move on, and it's particularly useful in more complex negotiations. Voss calls it the accusation audit.
An accusation audit. That sounds intense. What is that?
I know, right? It sounds a little intimidating, but it's actually a way to build trust and create transparency. Basically, you're preemptively addressing any potential objections or negative assumptions that the other side might have.
So you're basically bringing up their concerns before they even have a chance to voice them.
Exactly. It's like disarming a bomb before it explodes. By acknowledging those potential landmines up front, you're showing that you're not afraid of difficult conversations and that you're genuinely interested in finding a solution that works for everyone involved.
Okay, I can see how that would be effective, but it also sounds a little risky. Aren't you potentially planting seeds of doubt that wouldn't have even come up otherwise?
It's a delicate balance, for sure. But Voss would say those concerns are likely already present, whether voiced or not. By addressing them head-on, you control the narrative and create an opportunity to reframe those objections in a more positive light.
Makes sense. So it's about being proactive, taking control of the conversation, and addressing those elephants in the room before they derail the whole negotiation.
Precisely. Now, remember that thing we were talking about earlier, the power of no?
Oh, yeah, that's one I'm still wrapping my head around. How can no possibly be a good thing in a negotiation?
It is strange, isn't it? We're practically programmed to dread hearing no, like it's a full stop.
Yeah, like the conversation's over before it even began. But Voss flips the script on that, making no a starting point instead.
Because think about it, a quick yes,
Mm-hmm.
often it's just a knee-jerk reaction,
Right.
right? Doesn't mean they've weighed their options.
True, it's like they're just trying to end the conversation quickly.
Exactly. But a no?
Yeah.
That tells you they're engaged, actually considering their side of things.
And that gives you information. So instead of a dead end, no is actually an opportunity to ask questions, figure out what's really going on.
Exactly. Uncover those hidden needs we were talking about.
Yeah.
And tailor your approach based on that feedback.
Makes sense. It's like that saying, every no gets you closer to a yes. But Voss takes it up a notch, showing us how to make no work for us.
Exactly. He even uses it in hostage situations, which sounds crazy at first.
Yeah, how do you even do it? Like, no, I don't want to release the hostages just yet.
Well, he gives this example of asking a hostage taker, "You seem incredibly trapped right now. Anything I can do to make you feel safer?"
Whoa. So he's not demanding they surrender or release anyone. He's acknowledging their fear, giving them a way to express it without escalating things further.
Exactly. Offering a way out. It's about giving them a sense of control, which, oddly enough, can make them more receptive to ending the standoff peacefully.
That's incredible. Shows how these tactics really get at the psychology of these situations. But what about those everyday negotiations we all face? Asking your boss for a raise, for example.
Those can feel just as daunting as any hostage situation, especially since there's history there, existing relationships.
And let's be honest, it's easy to get flustered, say the wrong thing in the heat of the moment.
Absolutely. That's where having tools like mirroring, labeling, calibrated questions, they help you stay cool under pressure.
So you can respond thoughtfully, strategically, instead of just reacting emotionally.
That's the goal. Voss also talks about the importance of being prepared to walk away if the deal isn't right.
Right, knowing your worth. That no deal is better than a bad deal mentality.
Exactly. Having a strong BATNA is key.
For those who don't know, BATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Basically your backup plan.
Right. If this negotiation falls apart, what's your next best move? Knowing that gives you leverage. You're not desperate to make any deal.
It's about knowing what you're willing to accept and what you're not, which actually brings us back to the power of no.
It all ties together, doesn't it?
It does. Now, something that really resonated with me is that negotiation isn't about being ruthless or winning at all costs.
Right. It shouldn't be a battle.
Voss emphasizes finding solutions that work for both sides, where everyone feels good about the outcome.
Which takes us back to that idea of tactical empathy. You can't get to a mutually beneficial solution if you don't genuinely understand the other person's needs and motivations.
Absolutely. It's about collaboration, not combat. Building bridges, not burning them. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into never split the difference, what are some key takeaways our listeners can start using right away?
Remember, negotiation is a skill. The more you practice these techniques, the more natural they'll become. You can start small. Next time you're haggling over the price of something, remember what we talked about.
Exactly. Use every opportunity to flex those negotiation muscles, and before you know it, you'll be navigating those high-stakes situations like a pro.
Exactly. Just remember, as Chris Voss says, every interaction is a negotiation. So get out there and make those interactions count.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from tactical empathy and the surprising power of no to those calibrated questions that can shift the entire dynamic of a negotiation.
It's amazing how much we can learn from those high-stakes hostage situations and how those lessons apply to everyday life.
If you're looking to up your negotiation game, whether you're dealing with tough business deals or just trying to get a better deal on your next car, Never Split the Difference is definitely worth a read.